I was in a really dark place when I encountered a cult that changed my life forever. For the better. I was 23 years old. It was a Saturday evening, and I was already drunk as my friend Ricardo drove us to what I thought was a church barbecue. We were on the outskirts of town and had just turned down a dirt road. Back in those days, I couldn't do anything sober. I was struggling, and Ricardo had heard that this place could possibly help me. Of course, I'd been sober when I agreed to attend the barbecue, but sober was a long way off as we pulled up to a place where a bunch of cars were parked in a field of wild grass next to a couple of long, low buildings. I could smell something cooking, so the barbecue portion of the deal was intact. Ricardo shut the engine off, and we went to get out, but I stopped him with a hand.
"Listen,"
I said, slurring.
"Thanks for looking out for me. Sorry if I'm a bit much to deal with at times. You're a good friend, man. The best."
Ricardo gave me a sad smile.
"Through thick and thin,"
he said.
"Never again,"
I finished. It was some stupid saying we'd come up with in high school, a contradiction of sorts, but it seemed appropriate at the moment. We headed to a wide courtyard area between two buildings where about 36 people were milling around. There were tables of snacks and coolers of non-alcoholic drinks. A couple of grills were going. But what I immediately fixated on were the people in baby blue polo shirts and khaki shorts walking around with smiles frozen on their faces. They made up about a third of the people.
"Oh, shit, dude,"
I said.
"Is this a cult? It looks like a cult."
I don't know.
Ricardo said.
I just read that they boast a 90% success rate with alcoholics.
I scoffed and pulled out my metal flask.
"Yeah, they probably tie them up and beat it out of them."
I took a swig.
Come on, dude. Everyone can see you.
Ricardo said.
"You're right.
I said.
Better finish it before someone takes it away."
I chugged the rest of the liquor down, knowing it was a bad idea as I did it. Then I put the flask away and said,
"F it. We're here already. There's a couple of cuties."
Before Ricardo could answer, I ventured forth into the throng, barely able to walk without stumbling. The next hour or so was a blur of hitting on girls who didn't want to be hit on, stuffing my face, arguing with cult members, and generally making an ass out of myself. All the while, Ricardo was doing his best to keep me on a short leash. After the sun was down, one of the cult members called everyone into one of the flanking buildings for what he said was entertainment, but what I knew meant brainwashing. I turned the other way. Ricardo stopped me, but I told him I was just going to take a piss. To be fair, I did have to piss, but I had no intention of undergoing the brainwashing afterward. I stumbled around the other building and drained my tortured bladder against the wall. And that was when something caught my eye in one of the windows. Most of the window was covered with foil from the inside, but there was a small hole in the foil about the size of a quarter. I bent down and peered through the hole, seeing a half-naked young woman strapped to a bed in the middle of the room. She had a gag in her mouth and was clearly trying to get free. In my drunken state, I did the dumbest thing possible. I banged on the window and shouted,
"Hey! Hey!"
The young woman looked toward me, her eyebrows shooting up as she fought harder against the straps. There was a door in the building about 20 yards to my right, and it flew open while I was trying to figure out what to do. A big man dressed in nothing but khaki shorts came running out.
"Hey!
I said.
What are you doing?"
I didn't realize the danger I was in. Not yet. The man ran at me and grabbed me by the neck before I knew what was happening. He looked around before dragging me over toward the door.
"Help!"
I shouted, hoping Ricardo would hear me in the next building over. The man stopped dragging me and slapped a hand over my nose and mouth while his other hand tightened around my throat. Panic cut through the drunken haze, and I realized I was about to die. I had no weapons, I didn't carry a knife, and the man outweighed me by a good 50 pounds. But I did have something. I grabbed the flask out of my back pocket and slammed it into the side of the guy's head. His grip loosened on me, allowing me to draw in a ragged breath. His eyes went wild with anger. Just as his hands tightened on me again, I hit him with the flask a second and then a third time. He finally let go and stumbled toward the door he'd come out of. I ran up behind him and hit him once more, and he went down. Pocketing the flask, I ran inside and got the woman free, hustling her out to the car. I then ran and got Ricardo, disrupting the little brainwashing session going on in the small auditorium. By the time any of the other cult members realized what was happening, Ricardo was driving the three of us out of there. We took the woman to the police station, and she told them all the crazy that was going on in there. The cult leader guy, the one who'd tried to kill me, was arrested after he woke up from his coma. I never had a drop of alcohol again after that night. The near-death experience was a wake-up call of sorts, but I still carry that dented flask with me everywhere. Usually, it has cold-pressed coffee in it. So you see, cults can actually do some good once in a while. I clutched the knife under the baggy sleeve of my robe as they led me through the room. There were 3 of them, 1 behind me and 2 flanking me. We all wore the same black robes that dragged on the polished floor. I'd worked so hard to get to this point. I'd done things I wasn't proud of. Things that I justified by saying that if I could just get to this point, it would all be worth it. Tonight was the night. My last chance to make up for all the blood I'd spilled along the way. There's an old saying about power not corrupting people, but people corrupting power. I hoped whoever said that was right, because if power wasn't the corruptor, then I could wield it to do good. We moved down a flight of stairs and into a large chamber. Dozens of people dressed in identical robes lined the chamber, creating an aisle down which we walked. The people were chanting. The words were familiar to me. I'd learned them. And I had stood where these people were, watching as a man or a woman was led down toward the inner sanctum, the center of power, the lair. The knife was slippery with sweat. I pressed the flat of the blade against the inside of my left wrist as I walked through the chamber. Candles flickered and the space thrummed with immense energy. This was the kind of thing people imagined when they thought about cults world leaders were a part of. The kind of caricatured, over-the-top place that brought to mind deals with the devil or human sacrifices. And, as I had spent over 20 years finding out, people weren't wrong. We reached the 2 massive doors to the lair and stopped. The man who'd been following now stepped around and used an ornate key to unlock the doors. He then pulled them open and stepped aside to let me and the 2 other men inside. He stayed behind, closing the doors after we were in. The lair was incredibly dark once the doors were closed, except for the single column of light that shone down on an altar 20 yards ahead. Upon the altar lay a teenage girl, unconscious and arranged with her hands crossed over her chest and her right ankle crossed over her left. In the darkness on either side of the long chamber, I could hear heavy breathing. As my eyes adjusted, I could make out vague shapes in my peripheral vision. Giant, leathery wings flapped idly. Horns jutted from heads and spines. Claws clicked together. Snouts clamped and released. It wasn't often that these beings let their true selves show. Usually, they looked like almost any other human you'd pass on the street, but not tonight. I strode up to the altar, the other 2 men keeping pace with me. Stepping into the light, I took the knife out from where I'd been gripping it and held it up in both hands, showing it to the creature sitting in the dark on the other side of the altar. He, if you could call it a he, grunted. I could barely see him nod his huge horned head. I brought the knife down again, arms at my sides. The 2 men stepped forward and pulled my robe off, leaving me wearing only a pair of special underwear made from human skin. The 2 men stepped back while I took a single step forward, bringing the knife up, tip pointed down at the girl's heart. It was the moment of truth. All I had to do was jam the blade down and shout the words I'd memorized. If I'd prepared everything correctly, all I'd done to get here would be worth it. If I messed up somewhere, all would be for naught. I took a breath, and I jammed the blade down into my own chest. The pain ripped a ragged scream from my throat. but it was overshadowed by the screeching howl from the shadow-draped beast in front of me. The demon rushed toward me, but I recovered quickly enough to shout very specific words of a long-dead language. As soon as I said them, the temple began to shake and crack. All the lesser demons I passed on the way in were now in a frenzy, rushing toward me with sharp teeth and sharper claws. I pulled the knife out even as my form changed, the spirit of life entering my body through the wound over my heart. I spent more than 2 decades preparing for this, more than 2 decades ensuring my secrets were safe, and that the tablets on which the ritual was written never saw any other mortal eyes. And as the power flowed into me from everywhere, I knew that I'd been right. It was worth it. My eyes flared with light, blinding the demons who scrambled toward me. It gave them pause, and they stopped their mad dash to rip me apart. I looked around, my new vision allowing me to see them as they really were. Small, dark, and wispy figures, fueled by hate and greed and lust. I looked around at them as they cowered, realizing what stood before them. And I smiled. It was time to kill some demons.
Come quick!
The shout comes from the tree line, where my brother and a couple of other men are working to clear trees so we can expand the planting fields. It's Brother Gary who's shouting, and I can hear something in his voice that sends a sick feeling spiraling through me. Someone's hurt. I just know it. Abandoning the half-full basket of newly harvested potatoes, I run toward the tree line with several other members of the church. I come upon a group of men standing in a semicircle, their backs to me. I can easily tell that my brother isn't among those standing around. The sick feeling gets worse. The odd man out, who's wearing a blood-red outfit in contrast to our drab gray ones, turns his head to look at me. We call him Prophet, and he's the leader of our little group. I wonder what he's doing out here. It's rare that he comes out to help with the work, instead choosing to commune with God for most of the day. Before I can break through the barrier to see what's happening, Prophet comes up and grabs my shoulders.
Brother Wayne,
He says.
you don't want to see this.
Tears sting my eyes.
What happened?
I ask, voice cracking.
What happened to my brother?
Let's go to the church.
Prophet says.
Jason is in a better place now.
No!
I shout, throwing his hands off me and shoving through the shocked onlookers. I see my brother's body, crushed under a fallen pine tree.
How?
I say to no one in particular.
How did this happen?
It was an accident, Brother Wayne.
Brother Jude says. He's one of the Prophet's closest confidants, part of the inner circle.
Let's go back, Brother Wayne.
Prophet says in his soft, benevolent voice. He comes toward me for a second time, but I move, hurrying away from him before he can touch me again. As I trudge back to the barracks buildings, chaotic thoughts swirl in my mind. That's 3 accidental deaths in 3 years on the compound. First, there was Sister Melissa, who fell off a cliff on the property while out on a walk with God, as Prophet calls them. Then there was Brother Lionel, who was killed in a car accident on one of his trips to town to sell some of our produce at a farmer's market. And now Jason, my real brother, dead because a tree fell on him. It doesn't seem right. And why was Prophet around when it happened? He just happened to be nearby? Did he foresee Jason's death like he claims to foresee the rapture? I slam into the barracks building and go to my cot, sitting down to think as I wipe my eyes. And as people come in to console me, I can't help but think that the man I've chosen to devote my life to, the man who I believe will lead me to salvation, is behind these deaths. It's a thought I can't believe I'm thinking, but it's there nonetheless, sitting at the forefront of my mind. So as the afternoon turns into evening, I play along, doing all the things everyone expects of me. I pray at dinner. I attend the night service along with everyone else, where Prophet recites a moving speech about God's infallible nature and how my brother is in a better place now, by God's side. But underneath my calm exterior, suspicion and anger build like magma in a volcano getting ready to erupt. I can barely hold it together, and I find myself shaking with rage. I slip out of the room about 10 minutes before the night service will end, Outside the church, I look up at Prophet's house, sitting atop a hill. Calling it a house is an understatement. It's a mansion. As I walk past the back of the church building, I see the $100,000 SUV parked next to the back door. Brother Jude sits in the car. When the service is done, Jude will take our esteemed leader, along with whatever women he chooses for the night, up to his mansion. After grabbing a baseball-sized stone from the ground, I walk up to the driver's door and knock. Jude rolls down the window.
What?
I don't hesitate. I slam the stone into Jude's face. My original plan was to ask him about the deaths, but I can't. I've hit him too hard. He's unconscious. So I hit him again, to make sure he doesn't wake up. It takes me several minutes to drag him out of the seat and into the back of the vehicle. Then I sit in the driver's seat with the window rolled up, waiting. Finally, Prophet comes out. The windows are heavily tinted, so when he comes out, he can't see me in the front seat. He gets into the back seat first, leaving the door open so the 3 women he's chosen for the night can climb in. But before any of them can follow him in, I slam on the gas and take off. The door shuts on its own, and I peer into the rearview mirror, happy to see the look on Prophet's face when he realizes it's me.
Stop the car now,
he says in his confident, commanding voice. I don't stop. I head up toward the cliff where Sister Melissa had her little accident nearly 3 years ago.
Tell me about the deaths,
I say.
Why did they die?
What do you mean, Brother Wayne?
Are you talking about the accidents?
I put the pedal to the floor. Trees flash past on both sides.
Tell me or we're going off the cliff.
It's not far now, a half mile.
I can't tell you what I don't know,
Prophet shouts.
Fine,
I say.
I hope you're right about the afterlife, because we'll be there in less than a minute.
For a long moment, there's only the sound of the engine as we approach the spot where there's a sharp turn in the dirt road. If I keep going straight, the cliff is about 15 yards further on. If I turn right and stay on the road, we live. I look at the Prophet in the rearview mirror.
Life insurance,
he says.
Now slow down.
I slow down a bit.
Tell me, running this place is expensive,
he says.
So I take out policies on a few select brothers and sisters. Then the policy pays out when there's an accident. It's all part of God's plan, brother.
I nod my head.
That's what I thought.
I jam the pedal to the floor. Prophet screams as we bump off the road. And just as we're approaching the edge of the cliff, I jump out of the car, rolling painfully on the rocky ground. The vehicle slows rapidly, but it's still going too fast. It plunges off the cliff. I can hear Prophet screaming inside for a moment before the sounds of breaking glass and twisting metal replace it. I get to my feet and limp over to the cliff face, looking down at the crumpled mess of the vehicle that's just coming to rest at the bottom.
Bet you didn't see that coming, Prophet.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe and smash that like button to get notified every time I upload a new video. You can also check out some more of my animated horror stories right here.